All right, here we go. What I wanted to do briefly is kind of give you a synopsis of the first 10 pages of Chapter 2, which actually is from a book by John Keegan about World War I. The chapter begins with an overview of the situation in the Balkans immediately prior to the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. I guess shaky and volatile and fragile would be appropriate adjectives. What had actually happened is that for 5 centuries, the Ottoman Empire had controlled most of the Balkan region, but especially beginning in the 1800s, that control is going to fade away as the Ottomans lose a series of wars. And so by the beginning of World War I, there's really a power vacuum, sort of, in the Balkan regions, where there's a lot of scrambling for power. In 1908, for example, Austria-Hungary had annexed or taken over Bosnia. Serbia had fought a couple of Balkan wars just prior to World War I and had expanded as well. And so what you're getting in the Balkans is really kind of a collision course between an expansive Austria-Hungary, which is ironic because it too was quite fragile, and a very nationalistic Serbia, which wanted to unite all Serbians and perhaps even all Slavic people into this greater sort of Slavic nation. Kind of goes with the ideas of Pan-Slavism in some ways. Now, of course, Serbia was hoping to get the support of Russia in any future sort of conflict with Austria-Hungary or any other nation for that matter. But we need to be careful because during the two Balkan Wars, which had happened just prior to World War I, Serbia had been on the winning side and had gained territory. Yet at the same time, Russia kind of held Serbia back a bit when, for example, Serbia wanted to take over Albania. So it's not necessarily clear that Russia was chomping at the bit to go into war for Serbia under any circumstance. And in fact, in the past, on a couple of occasions, Austria-Hungary had actually mobilized its troops against Serbia, and Russia had kind of stood still. So the evidence is not clear that it was a fait accompli, if you will, that Russia would come to Serbia's side. I think that's probably true to some extent. Anyway, so on June 28, 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, he is assassinated in Sarajevo, Bosnia, by a group of Serbian nationalists. They belonged to an organization called the Black Hand. It was a very secretive group, and Austria-Hungary believed that the leader of the assassination, sort of a mysterious figure called APIS, APIS, was in fact also head of the intelligence division of the Serbian army. So they're saying, okay, you have something to do with this, Serbia, and they use this as an excuse to, Keegan would say, to anticipate a war with Serbia. It's really to put Serbia in its place, and it's not so much just about the assassination, but rather it's in a broader context about the struggle between Austria, Hungary, and Serbia in the Balkan region. So Keegan would say that, for example, the Austro-Hungarian foreign minister, Count Berchtold, was eager to go to war. The army chief of staff, Konrad von Hotzendorf, was eager to go to war as well. Now, there were some who were not as eager within Austria-Hungary. The Emperor Franz Joseph was not. He did not want to go to war, or was not eager to go to war, nor were some of the Hungarians in the leadership. They were kind of fearful that what would come out of the war was again an accommodation of Serbia into an Austria-Hungary Slavic kind of three-part nation. So they didn't want to share the power with the Slavs, basically, according to what Keegan says. Anyway, so Austria-Hungary does want to go to war, but they're afraid. And they're afraid that the Russians will enter the war. And this is, as one of the students, John, pointed out, a real indication that Austria-Hungary was really tied to its war plans. It was almost certain that Russia would enter the conflict and acted with this assumption. So, and it was afraid. So therefore it goes to Germany and it says, okay, we want to attack Serbia, but we don't want to do it without your support. And this is when Germany gives the Austro-Hungarians the so-called blank check, which many historians would see as very important, because if they didn't give Austria-Hungary the blank check, Austria-Hungary may not indeed have been so eager to go into conflict for fear of Russia. Now, again, Keegan, however, says that Germany was not necessarily anticipating a war by giving this blank check. They were assuming that Austria-Hungary would simply be in a very localized war with Serbia. And if you look at what the Kaiser was doing there during this period, there's some evidence to suggest maybe that's true, because the Kaiser was on vacation, or was going on vacation. And how could a nation's leader go on a vacation if he really anticipated that his country would indeed be going to war in a few weeks or less than a month? So yeah, there's some compelling evidence there. Anyway, a now sort of courageous Austria-Hungary gives Serbia a list of 10 ultimatums, saying, okay, unless you do these things, we will declare war on you. The key ultimatum was that Serbia demanded that it be allowed to go on to Austria-Hungary demanded that it be allowed to go onto Serbian territory to carry out an investigation of the assassination. That was the key element. Now, again, for Serbia, this is a violation of their nationalism or their national independence. And so they're very reluctant to go along with it for clear reasons. Yet Keegan points out that even though they are reluctant, they probably would have gone along with it. But then something happens. And that's when Russia throws its weight behind Serbia. In fact, Russia initiates sort of a pre-mobilization of its army, period preparatory to war, I think it was called. Yeah, period preparatory to war, where it's not a full mobilization, but it's putting your troops on alert about a possible mobilization, essentially. Now, again, did this equate an aggressive Russia anticipating a war? Who's to say exactly? But when Germany sees what's happening, of course, this is going to create tensions in Germany. And again, it goes back to these war plans that they're so precise, they're so inflexible, that if you anticipate that your enemy is carrying out his war plan or her war plan, however you refer to countries and gender, then you better get yours underway or you're going to be left behind. And so that's kind of the impression I'm getting from reading this book. Now, a couple other things that are mentioned is that Keegan points out that there's really poor communication between the leaders at this point in history. It's unlike today where you can call somebody or you can have a quick communication instantly. This was not happening prior to World War I, and so this lack of communication was a real negative when it came to understanding among the leaders what was going on. I think that's key. He also points out that, which I thought interesting, it's just a side note, so I think I'll mention it, is that when Austria-Hungary gives its ultimatum to Serbia, it deliberately waits until the French president, who was visiting Russia, leaves Russia. And again, that points out again how Austria-Hungary was so tied to these war plans, because they felt, okay, if we give this ultimatum and the French president is meeting with the Russian leaders, they will be able to create a response immediately. And again, the assumption would be, I suppose, that they would organize their war strategy. So the Austro-Hungarians deliberately wait until the French president sails from Russia back to France before it gives Serbia the ultimatums. Anyway, that's just a brief overview of the first 10 pages. I will finish up this chapter in a further recording. So anyway, I hope that was useful and it gives you some sort of insights into this reading and some of the events that kind of led to World War I, at least the short-term cause, the July crisis.